episode is brought to you by the Consultancy Growth Network. As you'll know, I'm a big believer in learning from people who've achieved the things that you want to. It's why I run this podcast, to share the stories of consulting leaders and how they've got to where they are today. So when I started talking to Mark Jansen and the team at Consultancy Growth Network, it was clear there was an obvious fit between Climate Consulting and their mission and what they are building with their network. But you're probably asking, what is the Consultancy Growth Network? The Consultancy Growth Network is the leading community of boutique consulting leaders. It brings together seasoned consulting growth experts who successfully scaled their own boutiques, with rapidly growing consulting founders looking to emulate their success. Now, you might be thinking, who are these growth experts? What do they actually know about consulting? And this is one of the most exciting things that personally I find about the network. The team at the Consultancy Growth Network have searched far and wide for some of the best boutique consulting leaders to help their members on their journeys, some of which I have previously interviewed for this podcast, such as Don Morehouse and Augusto Negrillo. But it's not just the insights from these people that you will benefit from. By joining, you get access to their jam-packed calendar of regular in-person and online events, their comprehensive growth hub of resources, and their active Slack community. Through all of these channels, you can learn, solve challenges, and achieve the goals you want for your firm. And now, if that wasn't enough reason to sign up, the Consultancy Growth Network is giving all listeners to this podcast a special sign-up offer. If you join for 12 months, you join for that next year, you will get your 13th month for free, giving you that extra month to continue to build on everything you're learning and continue to benefit from the network. To sign up, just visit consultancygrowthnetwork.com or contact their partnerships director, Luke at consultancygrowthnetwork.com. And when you're talking about joining, mention Create Engage or Climate Consulting, and you will get that special sign-up offer. Hi, and welcome back to Climate Consulting. In today's episode, I speak to Sue Lohr, partner at the Vibrant Company and someone who has built and sold not one, but two successful consulting firms. Sue played a leading role in building Synergy and Cormis, helping both to grow into high-performing transatlantic consultancies that went on to successful exits, achieving the second exit in record time. Along both of those journeys, she learned what it really takes to scale a firm quickly, how to do so while keeping your culture intact, and doing it in a way that ultimately means that somebody wants to buy the firm. In this episode, we talk about all of the key decisions that shaped both of those journeys, what the first taught her that she was able to take into the second to make that much faster in terms of growth. And we talk about all of the underpinnings from value to pricing to culture that made both of those firms great at what they did. Whether you are looking to emulate Sue's success, whether you are looking to bring those lessons into a practice you are running within a consultancy, or maybe you are thinking about where to take your career next and want to know how you can set yourself up for success, there is so much to take away from this conversation. So with the intro done, all that's left to say is please enjoy today's conversation with Sue Lohr. Sue, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to today. Obviously, we've got to know each other through the Consultancy Growth Network. I know a little bit about the journey, but I've deliberately not asked a lot of the questions because I want to save them for today. For our listeners, though, could you share so that they know a little bit about you, your background and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, certainly. So I think I started life with a degree in biochemistry, but very quickly realized that I was never going to be a good biochemist. I don't think I have the patience for that. So I left and went into marketing and joined a graduate training scheme at a big pharmaceutical company and spent about 8 years there learning all the fundamentals. And it was a terrific time. I think it was like a booming age of pharma in the late 80s, early 90s, to give you an age. And it was fantastic. Lots of training, lots of support, lots of courses, chance to do loads of different things. I loved it, actually. And after 8 years, I moved and joined another pharmaceutical company, but this time in the US, and went and worked with them. Found it a little bit more of a constrained environment, but settled into living in the US, really enjoyed Philadelphia, which is where I settled, and spent 3 years with them. I was running one of their business units, a global business unit for them, which I really enjoyed, had a lot of freedom, a chance to put into practice all the stuff I'd learned in my Glaxo job. And then I left there to set up the US arm of a UK medical communications company called Synergy, and started the business from scratch in the US. It had a UK office at that time, and then spent the next 14 years growing that business and building out a successful consulting medcoms company that served a lot of US clients, but we did a lot of work in Europe. So mostly pharma companies that were based in the US on the East Coast, and but delivering a lot of work in Europe. And then we sold that business in 2010 to a big global network. And then I exited the business in 2014, having worked through the earn-out period. And then I think I had a slightly different chapter. I had a little bit of a rest because I was quite tired at that time. And after about 6 months, got involved in a number of different businesses, some of them nothing to do with stuff I'd done before. So I got involved in running a cat feeding system. We did a big Kickstarter campaign. We're asked to go on Dragon's Den for that business. And so I got involved with that for a couple of years. And I also became very active in a group called Robin Hood Ventures in Philadelphia, which is an angel investing group. And that was a wonderful group of people where we would choose to invest in different businesses, do due diligence, and then take a little bit of a hands-on role with the CEO of the business to help them grow. And obviously, they benefit, we benefit as investors. And then come 2017, I then got involved with Cormis, setting up the US arm for what was a very successful little business in the UK, looking at capability development. And Cormis, we had a plan when we set it up to exit within 5 years. We did sell that business in 2020 and finished the earn-out at the end of 2023. So that takes me to nearly now. So last year, the last actually probably 2 years, I've been involved with Sarah, Matthew and Ilagana Patel in Vibrant Company. So there again, we're now 3 very good friends working together on a venture which was initially Sarah's and now has grown to involve the 2 of us as well, which is fantastic.
What a journey, Sue. What a journey. We'll talk about all of that. And obviously, yes, through Consultancy Growth Network, as I mentioned, but also through Sarah's work. I know we've met and sort of had a great time at the Vibrant event that I went to. And I have got some questions on that later, because I'm sure particularly right now where the economy is tough, a lot of consultancies are struggling. Advice on how to stay vibrant is something I think a lot of leaders need. I'm really keen to talk about that journey that you had. And I actually, so just because I love to know about things I didn't know about the cat feeding system, tell me, when you say system, are we talking like a robotic feeder, or are we talking like a course on how to feed cats?
No, it's actually a product. Probably the first and last time I will ever get involved in a product company, because it's way more complicated than a consulting business. It's called Doc and Phoebe's Cat System. You can buy it on Amazon. And it was invented by a vet who is a friend of mine in the US. And she decided, or she had basically knew from her job as a vet, that cats need to feed as if they were in the wild. So actually it's a feeding system that allows you to feed your cat that mimics the way that they would eat in the wild. So you have these little no bowls, they're little cat bowls. They're made 3D printed initially and then manufactured, that you put the kibble into, and then you hide them around the house, and the cat can hunt them and find them, and then gets the food, treat and reward. So if you have a cat that keeps you up at night, you can hide 2 or 3 at night and it keeps them busy, and they stop bugging you at 4 a.m. to feed them. So yeah, it was a really fun couple of years. We did a Kickstarter campaign to raise all the funds for launch, which was a new thing for me at the time, and had a lot of fun. And that business was then actually sold on to a company that has a whole portfolio of pet products. Because one thing I did learn with a product is you can't just have one. You need to have many in your portfolio to make a business.
Gosh, so is that 3 exits then I'm hearing?
Yes.
Gosh, that is quite a run, Sue. And you may tell me it's too different for us to touch on here, but just because you've mentioned it, and something I've heard a lot of consultancies talk about is creating product. Now, granted, this is technology product, but you have done both service and product. What are those key differences? And again, if this is too much of a reach, cat product to software, but what you mentioned, they're very different. What took you aback, and what should someone listening think, before I do a product, I should know this?
Well, I do think, and I have to say I'm not an expert on technology products, but I think that with Cormis and with Synergy, we did think quite carefully about how we could wrap our offerings into something that was seen as a product by the client. And by that, it meant that we could put some IP around it and that we could have something that we could then sell as a product to other clients. And I do think we started to do that with Synergy. It's very attractive, I think, to a buyer, that you have something that is yours, that is your product. To me, it's not the physical product like the cat feeding system where we had to manage, manufacturing was manufactured in China. We had to deal with the Chinese New Year and 2 months and inventory and huge amount of outlay. You don't have all of those issues. But I do think that as a consulting business that you can have products, and I put those in kind of
air quotes for those who can't see you.
Because I think that does basically underline what you can deliver to your clients. So I think thinking about your consulting business and the products that you might offer is not a bad thing.
Well, let's move on to consulting businesses then, because while I'm fascinated by the cat feeding system, I suspect many of our listeners are here for consulting knowledge, albeit one of my colleagues has, I think, 3 cats. So I will be finding the product afterwards and recommending it to her. And just because I want to fact check my sort of research, you mentioned with Cormis, set up US arm in 17, exited in 2020. So that was actually 3.
We sold it in 2020.
Sold in 2020.
And finished the exit in 2023, which actually was a year earlier than we had planned. And I think that was because of COVID. For us, COVID was a huge opportunity for the business, and we grew the business at a crazy rate that was beyond our forecast. So we ended up actually maxing out our earn out a year early.
Okay. So 3 years to the point of selling the business, and then we have the earn-out. That is still a lot quicker than the Synergy journey. And I will use this as just a construct, but you can take us where is relevant. Of almost everyone listening to this podcast are people running consultancies, wanting to run consultancies, or wanting to build a career, which might be building a practice. So building a business is at core to that. And I'd love to almost try and tease out, what is it that enabled you to go from 14 years in one business to 3 in another? And maybe we start with, you mentioned around both came from UK businesses into US. So maybe we just start around the origin of Cormis. How similar or different from that was that to Synergy? Was it further along than Synergy? Was it a similar starting point?
Actually, I think it was a lot smaller. So the origin of Cormis was really, Cormis was set up under a different name by a guy called Dan Mascalier and along with Ian Close. And they had run quite a lovely little business for maybe 5 or 6 years. And the business was ticking along really nicely. They were doing some really good marketing consultancy, a range of training, a bit of capability development, but they were thinking bigger, and they were thinking about how they could grow that business with a view to selling it down the line. So they actually brought in a strategic consultant to help them, a lady called Ilagana Patel, who's a very good friend of mine, and to ask her to have a look at the business with a view to kind of thinking about setting it up for bigger growth and sale. So she took a look at the value proposition, she repositioned the business, they rebranded the business, and as part of their business plan, decided that they needed to have a US arm, which would make them a lot more attractive to a buyer if they were looking for an exit kind of 5 years down the line. So Ela and I knew each other. She'd run a very successful ad agency before and exited to a big group. And we had worked together as in clients side by side. And we actually started work together when we were 22 at Glaxo. So we go back a very long way. So she picked up the phone to me and said, "Hey, Sue, I've got this lovely little business in the UK. We need a US business. Do you fancy setting it up?" And she goes, "You don't have to work in it full time. We'll find a CEO. You need to kind of function as a chair. Our goal is to get in and out in 5 years. Are you interested?" And I was like, absolutely. I mean, A, to work with her side by side. B, I was a little bit bored at the time. And I knew just the guy that I thought would be really good to run the business. So that was the origin of Cormis. We basically set it up with a goal to exit. Whereas Synergy, that was never the plan. The plan with the US business was to set up a successful business that would learn from the UK operation, which at that time was probably 10 years old, doing really well, had a great reputation. I was a client of theirs when I worked in pharma, so I knew the business. And the goal was to set up a business in the US to access the US market, which was vast. In practice, Synergy did most of its business ex-US, bizarrely, and the UK still served some of the US clients that it had at the beginning, for competitive reasons. But so things don't always go to plan. And the goal was not actually at the beginning, and for many, many years, was never to sell Synergy. It was to grow something that we were really proud of, that did fantastic work for clients, that was, best in its sector. And I think we did that very successfully for 8-9 years. And then the environment was starting to change. And during our annual business planning, we decided that actually maybe we should look at joining a big network that would give us some of the services that we didn't have in-house, that we didn't want to have in-house, and that would help us grow even more. So we started then to think about sale and exit. And my business partner in the UK, he's about 8 years older than I am, so he was already thinking, maybe what's the next thing I want to do? So that was a real change for us, probably around the 2009 mark, to say, yes, we do want to sell this business, because it takes some time to get a business ready for sale. And then the execution, then the earn-out, you're looking really at 5 years to do that. So it was a very different startup. And I think I'm not saying that we would have sold Synergy quickly had we set it up, but I don't think most people go into a business to sell it. They go into a business to grow something they're passionate about. And that's what we did with Synergy.
So I think that those differences are really interesting, because actually the second time around, as you say, you set it up to scale. And maybe then, rather than asking what you did differently, actually just what did you do to do that? And you mentioned one, we hired a CEO from the off. And I'd love to what were those pillars of either Ela's strategy, your strategy, the one you built together that said, right, this is how we're going to scale this business?
So I think having done it before with Synergy was a massive advantage for me, because, when you're running, when you're running a business and it's the first business you've run, you are kind of learning on the job. You're kind of building the plane as you're trying to go down the runway. And it's like that cartoon where you're laying out the track in front as the train's going ahead. And I often felt like that running Synergy. But coming into Cormis, I think there was a couple of things. One, we had processes in place in a startup business that were really there for a much more mature business. So we knew that Cormis was going to be offering capability development, that it needed to be really good at that, like the quality, what we put out the door, what we suggested to clients, the way that we interacted in terms of our client service and our follow-up, all of that stuff, which put us as like super high quality end for our business, which is where our pricing was pitched at. That all requires you to have really good internal processes so that you can make sure that if you are quality checking your work before it goes out, or it's built on a really solid model, or you've got the references or whatever you need in the pharma space, because our clients were the same pharmaceutical companies, that you have all that in place, that you're not kind of scrambling on the quality side. So the offering that you're making is underpinned by the way that you've set up the office. So that we were able to do with Cormis from the get-go. We had, good accountant in place. We had all the cost management in place. We knew how to track our time effectively. We knew what the costs of the business were. So all of that, we didn't have to learn on the job, which was a huge benefit and allowed us to kind of hit the ground running. And then consequently, when we did do work for clients, it was really good. And so that's how you get more business and how you grow. So that was one thing. The second thing was we had a pretty relentless focus on business development from the get-go. So everybody in the business, and at the start of Cormis, there was probably 4 of us, we were all equally responsible for BD. So we didn't have a separate BD person. We would sit down every week and we would take at least 2 hours to say, these are our 2 hours where we're going to do business development. So it might be researching clients. It might be making calls, writing emails, following up proposals, brainstorming the sorts of things that they might need, going through our address book of people we haven't contacted for a while. But we did it relentlessly every week. We had a big whiteboard and we'd all sit around the table and together we'd make out a plan for the next week of what we would do. And then the next week we would look at the stuff that we said we were going to do, check off what we'd done, and then make a list for the new week. It sounds a bit sort of pedantic, if you like, but it was a relentless focus on getting new business and following up on business and following up on leads. And what we found is that the person who's in front of the client, the consultant, is in the best place to know and to understand what the client's needs are for the next piece of business. So you can't let it just be the leader or it has to be everybody. So if you have we had consultants going into clients delivering, and they're in the best position to notice needs that we haven't met that they can then sell in when they're on or at least feed back to us. And we used to do an after action review for every program, which had two things. One is it would allow us to surface things that we could then go on to sell to that client. And two, it reminded us of the great work that we did. So they were very positive things. They were not about, well, what could we have done better next time and how could we do this if we did it again? Not at all. They were like, what did we do that hit Cormis's values and how delighted was the client and how can we delight them more? It was a very positive kind of growth focused feedback session, if that makes sense. So those two things, I think, were the two things that allowed us to kind of really accelerate.
Really interesting to hear. And to your point of the BD session, actually having that across the team and having that 2 hours as well, because I think, and we both know a lot of consultancies, often business development is the area they struggle with. And either it's done by one person or in some cases it's done by no one. So how did you, this is a really detailed question, but was that then 2 hours locked in on a Wednesday and it was right, we're all together around a table, emailing, calling?
Actually, it was a Wednesday. It was Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Yeah. So we would have 2 hours. So we'd have a Monday morning huddle where we basically lay out, okay, who's doing what for the week, what has to go out the door, who's out of the office, what's happening. So we always had a Monday morning huddle. And then we'd have a Wednesday afternoon BD because we found that was a good time. And then we'd have Bob was the chap that ran the business. We would have a Friday morning, like, okay, what are we looking at for next week? So we were quite rigid, actually, when I look back now, with that in the early days. Structured. We were quite structured with the BD piece and with our Monday morning huddle because it set everybody up for the week.
And so Bob is also something that, or someone I'd be interested in understanding in terms of the hire. Because I think both for businesses going to the US and just businesses in general, I have seen a number of consultancies where they go to the US and they will send a man or woman from the UK. I have seen less who hire on the ground. I'm mindful you were on the ground, so it was kind of, you were trusted there. But what led you to select that model of we will hire Bob in country? And the other side is, I don't know how big Cormis was when you set up the US business, but the US, from the little I know, Sue, people's salaries are higher. So it's a high cost. I can't imagine someone running a business is going to be a cheap person to hire. It's a big investment. How did you and Ela, you might not have to, that actually, yes, they should take on you. And we haven't actually shared what your role was. So I'm envisaging chair, but... Mm-hmm. And then take on Bob, because that feels like quite a successful leap. Yeah. But I'd love to understand that decision process.
So a couple of things. So I think a lot of that you have to give the credit to Ela. So she did convince the guys in the UK that if they were going to set up a US office, that it was a considerable, several £100,000 investment to get the US office up the ground, which isn't a huge investment, but nonetheless, I'm sure, I know, impacted their dividend that they could have taken from the business that year. So they had great faith in us and in Ela, I think, to do that. And we flew over, we met them. I knew actually Dan through Ela. Bob had never met anybody before, he just knew me. So he put trust in me, I had my trust in Ela, the boys had their trust in Ela. So it all worked out in the end. And Bob was a pharmaceutical exec. So I'd known him, actually, he'd been briefly a client actually for Synergy. I'd known him actually mostly socially for many, many years. And I thought, and he was looking for a new opportunity. And so he came in as a partner to the business and we basically backstopped an agreed salary for him for the first 2 years so that he could meet his mortgage and his other requirements that he had, not at the level of his farmer job, because he's obviously taking equity in the company, but we backstopped a salary, which I have to say we never actually had to do because the business took off and we were fine. And the same for me, they backstopped, the investment was to backstop a minimal salary for me. I worked 3 days in the business. I didn't in practice work 3 days in the business, but that was the plan as Ela was doing over here. And I think the rest of it was just, beginning to take up rent for a premises. And then we hired somebody who used to work for me at Synergy, who was awesome. So she followed me over to this business and was amazing. And then we started to hire. So with the three of us going, we then started to hire as we needed for the right kind of skills that we lacked, that we needed to bring in for this capability business. So it ended up being an investment from the UK, but because the US business got going quite quickly, we were able to kind of pay back that investment and carry on our own. I think it's very hard for somebody from the UK to drop into the US and kind of set up a business because it's quite different. It's very state specific. So all I'm talking about is a business in Pennsylvania. Like I have no idea what you would do if you had a business in Georgia or California or whatever. They're very different. It's state rules for personnel, for taxes, for everything. So you have to know you have to think carefully about where you are setting up your business and understand that you probably not only need a US person, but someone local to that state. And I think Bob had loads of connections already. So you need to have someone that's well connected as well. Again, harder for a UK person. I think if you followed your business over, because you had a load of business there and your clients were already there, and you were basically just relocating someone to be close to the clients there, that's a different proposition. But just saying, I'll set up in the US and I'll send Nick over and he'll get it going, I think is very hard for Nick.
Yes. And the state-by-state things, I guess, interesting just because I'm not familiar with, is that you mentioned there's the legislative side, different tax laws, etc. From a business culture perspective, is that the same? Is it, to your bit different in Pennsylvania to Philadelphia to New York to?
I think that's much similar. I mean, I can't speak to the West Coast because I think that's a whole other world over there. But the East Coast, the business culture and the clients are all very similar. And most companies do set up as a Delaware company, even though they trade in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, or wherever, Florida, just because the law is very clean and clear in Delaware. But that also means that you're treated as a foreign business if you're in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of ins and outs. You definitely need some good support from your accountant and your lawyer.
Yes, I will go no further on the legal impact of which state you base yourself in. You did mention there that you said Bob joined from industry. So again, if this is US versus UK specific, call it out as well, I have seen, if I focus on UK businesses, I have seen many executives struggle to make that jump because it's just a very different career. And for anyone else thinking, I want to hire a CEO either in the US or here, what was it about, you said you knew Bob from business but also socially, what was it about Bob that you were like, you will be able to make this jump and run a consulting business?
I think it is hard. I mean, I came from industry to run Synergy, and I think the key thing you have to let go is your ego. Because, you can have a big title and everyone in the US is a VP of something or other. And you can have a big title, a lot of people that you manage, and all of a sudden you're making the tea, you're sticking the envelopes, you're running around building furniture, whatever needs to get done in your new business. So you have to be somebody that is quite comfortable in their own skin, number one, and quite happy to be going from a position of, perceived power to someone who's a service to the client. So I knew Bob pretty well, and I felt very comfortable that he was able to do that. I don't think it was always easy for him, but I think he obviously did a very good job. The business grew gangbusters, and we had a great ride. But you do have to pick very carefully because it's not an easy transition, as you said.
And to your point of the business going gangbusters, you got from opening the office to agreeing a sale in 3 years, which is exceptionally fast for any consultancy. And you were working with Big Pharma, which, cliches, there is lots of money, which you might think, well, that's easy. But these are big organizations. They'll have entrenched relationships. You are a new brand. How did you build that sales pipeline and velocity so quickly? Because some of these businesses, it takes a year to get on the PSL and you're exiting in 3. So how did you short circuit some of that kind of ramp to really hit that velocity you did?
Well, a couple of things. One, we had the UK business already established. And so they had some clients in the US that they were pitching and winning. So we were able to, initially pick up that business and get going. And then the sum of the UK and the US business meant we could pitch for bigger bits of business because now we're global. And so we can handle both sides of the Atlantic. And the UK business actually did quite a lot of work in Asia and other domains. So I think that really helped us having an established kind of office already. We weren't like completely de novo. The name existed, the reputation was there, albeit Cormis was a relatively new name to many people. But I think I knew a number of people in pharma. We knew how to talk to clients to find out what their needs were. We had a couple of really good strokes of luck where we got onto a pitch docket for a big account. We won that, what started off as a very small piece of business. And then, my old business partner, Gareth, used to say to me, you don't need the whole dog, Sue, you just need to have the tail. And then you can work your way through the whole dog. You just need one little bit. And once you get one little toe in, then we were really confident in our offering and what we could deliver and the relationships we could build with the clients, that we could kind of expand our territory. And that's what we ended up with. We ended up with like 2 or 3 really big clients that we did tons of their capability work. They had whole capability department. We basically took most of that pie that was available.
If you are enjoying this episode so far, I have one small ask. I would massively appreciate if you could open your phone right now, hit share, and send this to someone in your network, one of your friends, one of your colleagues, one of your clients who you think would benefit from this interview. This podcast only runs because of you and because of the value you get from it. And it means so much to me to broaden that reach so we can help more consultants to climb in consulting. So please hit that share, send it to a friend, and I'm really excited to hear what they think too. And that might lead on to one of the things we talked about before this, and I was interested in. You've talked before around the importance of being clear on your value proposition and the value you bring. And you mentioned there around you took the whole capability pie. So you're obviously very good at rolling that out. I'd love to understand why that value piece is so important to you and how you and the team at Cormis built that. Because sometimes there is a tension of wanting to be focused versus someone might hear you've taken all the pie and therefore I've got to say I can do everything for everyone to get that. How did you strike that balance?
Well, I think we defined our pie as capability. So we didn't do everything. There were some times when people say, well, could you do this for us? And we're like, no, this is what we do. It's really important to me because if everybody in the organization is really clear about what you're doing and what you're doing really well, it gives the whole team a sense of confidence that we are really good at what we do. And this is what we do really well. So in terms of selling, the way they interact with clients, that confidence and that belief that they can absolutely do this and they will do this probably better than anyone else that you'll come to comes across, which I think then gets you the business. And then of course you have to deliver that. But I think that's really important to me that you know what you do really well. And I go back to, I think about why people join a consultancy business rather than going into the client side. And, when you're on the client side, as I've been, you have the kudos of working for a blue chip company, at a dinner party, everybody's heard of Glaxo or, whichever Aventis or Pfizer or whatever company you're working for. They've never heard of your little consulting business or the consultancy you work for. So people don't join for that reason. They join because they really want to make an impact and they're passionate about the work that you do. And so I think as a leader of a consultancy, it behooves me to remind everybody every day about why we're passionate about what we do and what impact we're making for the clients. And, with Synergy, we were educating opinion leaders about diseases and we were making a huge impact for that pharma company with Cormis, we were getting, people to perform at a higher level and really, shine more in their organization than they'd ever done before. Again, hugely satisfying work. So I think as a leader, it is our job to make sure that everybody in the organization understands why we're here, what impact they're making on clients, and what they individually are making within the consulting business. And I think that then becomes a bit of a snowball, because then when you go out to a client, you feel really confident and happy about what you're doing and why you're there.
I love that. And how, because I suspect you did, hearing how you structured BD, how did you, I guess, approach the structuring that to keep that repetition? Was that was you every day? Was there structure you put in place to continually get that message across and get everyone kind of understanding and using it? How did you build that in across the team?
Well, I think when we would do our reviews of projects that we'd completed, that was kind of a natural point to remind everybody about what we had done, what we'd achieved, what difference we'd made. And as I said, they were very positive. There was not really a focus on kind of, well, what would we do differently next time? Because that's gone. That's happened already. The next time's never going to be the same. So there's not really much point in doing that. You might as well just focus on what you did and how you made the client feel, and how you all felt about the positive impact that you had, and how those people felt walking out of the room having received the training intervention that you delivered, or whatever it was. And that is a much more energizing feeling for the whole team. And so everybody goes away going, yeah. And then they're more interested to do it again. And I think that just gets you a bit more momentum. And so those days when then you've got to do your 10 BD emails, you at least understand why you're doing it, even if you don't like it.
Well, as we're hearing, and as our listeners will be taking note, it's the key to success, and speeding up, if exit is your plan or growth, it's the key to success there.
The other thing we did do, going back to the conversation about the cap feeding system, is That's
quite a segue, Sue.
I know. we did think about, at those kind of end of project wrap-ups, about could we then take from that and package it in any way to sell it on. So there were a few things that Cormis had that we did repeat. I mean, they were always kind of obviously tailored to the client, but there were programs and packages and products that we did do. And some of those came out of those end of project wrap-ups where we'd say, well, that's really cool. Could we put it together now as a package, or could we add on that to something else we're doing? So that also became, again, a way of thinking about how can we sell more in.
I really like that. And yes, how can you use all the great things you've already built? And I think many consultancies are full victim of, they create a great thing and then it lives on a shelf or a virtual shelf somewhere. The other side of this, and links a bit again to your point of you had most of the capability pie, is pricing is one of those areas that many consultancies struggle with. And it links to value, is clients are always going to want the best for the cheapest. And especially now we're in a world where the economy isn't as strong, it can seem like the easy answer is to discount. And I know you've talked before about actually price was an area you were very firm on, you were set on. And I'd love to know how again, you thought about that and approached it with clients and still achieved that success you did within client.
Well, we did. It wasn't that we didn't discount, but we generally discounted for volume. So if we had over £1 million or $1 million with a client, then we would consider a discount. And then again, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you get more business. So you give the same, and it was a flat discount of a single digit percentage. It wasn't like it was a massive discount we were giving. So we did do some discounting, but I think that pricing wise, we would, when we package something, we would then be able to offer a package price for that thing, which again helped us get around the hours and people and tracking of everything, because now they're buying a piece of Cormis IP. So they'd buy a radar program. We had this program which was basically competitive wargaming activity and capability that we built, and we called it Cormis Radar, and we could sell Cormis Radar on its own. So I think the packaging of our offerings helped us with pricing, because we'd set a price for that, and that's what you get for that. And there isn't a discount unless you're in the volume category. For the other areas, I think when somebody came back and said, well, I don't have that budget, what can you do it for less? Then I think we just have a conversation about scope. and about what we might trim to meet that client's objective. But it wasn't us saying, well, actually, I'll work for half the money I was going to do. It was all about the scope, which, I noticed when I've had a lot of work done on this house. And when I have those conversations with contractors, that's exactly what they have. It's not about, I'm going to just cut the price of my piece of work. It's like, okay, well, maybe I won't build it out of that material. I'll do this material, so I think we can learn from that in the consulting business and have the discussion about what the scope is. And maybe there's a piece that we don't need to be doing because the client already has that information and we don't need to do that research. But I think, again, coming back to, if you're confident in what you're bringing, then it's about us helping the client see the value in what we're bringing. So, we have had a lot of occasions where we have helped the client sell our program on. So if they're not feeling confident to put that budget forward within their system, we can help with that. So we can put together the rationale and the robustness of the argument to say, this is why this capability needs to be developed and this is what it'll bring to the business. And that therefore gets us our piece of work done. So we've actually taken a slightly different to say, well, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but how can I help you see that this is the value that it needs to be?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I love the tradesman analogy. I often try and bring things back to our normal lives because, yes, in business, we can think it's a different world. And actually, a lot of these lessons, like you say, you can have this wood or that wood on the skirting. And actually, if your goal is just to replace the skirting, you might not care if it's the most expensive option. And as you say, actually being able to do that in your client work is no different.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we didn't do very well at Synergy, and at Cormis in the early years we didn't do either, is we didn't automatically take price increases when our people that we worked with, our suppliers, took an increase. So, because you've set a price, you've agreed a price. Every year there is inflation and there is extra cost to our businesses, but we were very reluctant to pass that on. So I think with Cormis, we became much better about saying, okay, every January there is an increase in price because our labour cost has increased, prices of whatever have increased, With Synergy, we were not particularly good at that. And I think that's definitely lost revenue to the business.
So it's a really interesting topic because, again, it's something I know a lot of consultancies struggle with. And you mentioned, in Cormis, you had a small number of large clients, and I might be paraphrasing. And I imagine you faced the problem that many will, which is, if client X is doing us great revenue, if I increase the price, well, they might leave. And then is a 5% increase worth a 20% loss in revenue? I guess, how did you approach that? A, internally to have the confidence, and B, with the client, so that it was just seen as normal course of business rather than an event that might lead to them leaving you?
Well, I think if you can make it be normal course of business, which it is in our everyday lives, it's a normal course of business. Every subscription goes up every year. Every piece of work that we do in our regular lives goes up every year, but our consulting businesses don't. So I think the goal is, at the outset of a client, if you can get it into the MSA or you can get it into your statements of work, that there's a
just contractually
increase every year, even if it's linked to something, I think that's the way to go. And I have worked with consulting businesses, even quite recently, that have never taken a price increase. They're 5-6 years old and they're still pricing at the levels that they were when they started. And I'm sure they're much more confident now and much more robust in their offer now than they were when they very first set out, and you'll take anything just to get off the ground. So I think we have to think of it. We're a business and businesses have increased costs every year, and therefore that should be part of doing business.
And just to your point, and this is really tactical, but to help people, to your point of, so putting it contractually in, so it's just something that happens. Did you then, January, was that regardless of when you started? So if someone started in April, they got the price increase as well as someone in October, or was it every 12 months? How did you approach that? Because again, I'm suspecting this is a question a listener will have, is like, is it blanket? Is it individual? How did you do that?
I think it's individual. I think it depends when you start with that client. But I think this expectation that you'll relook at the contract each year. And I tell you, I learned masses when we sold Synergy into the Omnicom network, because they do. In the advertising world, certainly in the US, they set budgets they hire based on these enormous budgets that the clients commit to a year ahead and on a 3-year contract, and they'll hire people to it, and they'll have all these built-in price increases. And bizarrely, because they negotiate rates with the client at a much higher level than we were operating at, because they're a massive supplier to the client. I'm taking Pfizer as an example. We were in a ridiculous situation where we had been doing a whole slew of advisory boards for Pfizer for price X. And all of a sudden, under our new network parent, it's negotiated at 20% higher than the price that they had been getting it for. But the poor client's got the same budget, but now his procurement people have now negotiated a higher price. It was crazy. So I think, these huge networks work like that. And it's hard for us to see that as a small individual consulting business. But I think that's part of I think part of what we can do. And certainly when we took Cormis into the network that we joined, we had a real policy to try and move all our prices up every single year, which we were pretty much successful across the board with.
It links to something I was keen to ask, and you've started it to an extent of almost the learnings. We've talked about what you took from Synergy that you did want to do in Cormis, and actually this one is one you didn't want to do. Things and it's a bit of a double negative, is you hadn't increased price, so you did increase price. Was there anything else in this that you learned that you did in Synergy that either you said, we're not doing this in Cormis, or you did and then turned off? And I guess for both, why?
I think we had a goal with Cormis to set up and have some really good processes in place. But I think I realised fairly quickly that we just didn't need those for the size of business that we were. So we used to have a second set of eyes policy on stuff that went out the door. So it always had to have a second set of eyes on it. Even if it was me writing an email, I would still have a second set of eyes before it went out if it was an important client correspondence. So some of those things we just didn't need because we were such a small, close group, and the work we were doing was much less technical because we were not, technically writing training on diseases. We were technically writing training on soft skills now. So I think we dropped a lot of stuff that initially we thought we needed, but we didn't. But I think the project management system, we had our own bespoke project management system at Synergy, which we built up that tracked hours against categories rather than against people, which allowed us to group things together and do budgeting really effectively. And we didn't have any of that sophistication in Cormis.
The question I would ask to that point of the complexity then is, how did it help you not having that in Cormis?
We didn't need it because we were such a small team that the community. So I think in Synergy, we were talking about 40 people. You need a level of more formal communication to manage the projects and the flow of jobs through the consultancy, because there's just much more volume going through, and there's many more clients, and there's a lot more things that could snag or could go wrong. Whereas in Cormis, we were all open plan in our office. So you literally could shout across the office if there was something. You just didn't need that same level of complexity.
I remember those days being in offices. So you can't shout across the Teams call, can you? And one other area with the Cormis, and this just struck me after our chat a few months ago, the cultural side. And I remember you mentioning, we all ate lunch together. It was a big thing for us. And culture is much more than one act. But how did you cultivate that culture? Or maybe the better question is, why was it so important to you? And then what were those critical moments that you either organically or deliberately put in place to continue to build it?
I think, to me, it comes back to, why do people join your business? And I think they join because they want to make an impact, and they join because they see that you are passionate about what you do. And even though, as a new graduate or someone who's fairly new into their career, they don't really know what you do because they don't know what they don't know. They're kind of buying into you. So people buy people fundamentally, which is why I think the office culture or the organizational culture is so important. So we did, and I don't think it's something that you can kind of write down on a piece of paper and prescribe, this is our culture, this is what we're going to do. I think it's about walking the talk. And I think the leader needs to set the tone. I have a very high need to play. I have a very low attention span. I like to do lots of different things. And the organization I created reflected that, as I was the leader of that organization. And so for us, having lunch together meant that we didn't have hierarchy, because everybody would be having their lunch around a table, chatting. And actually, we did a lot of work in lunch. So we would, people would very happily discuss something that was tricky for them in dealing with a client or a piece of work. They weren't sure where to go with it or what to look at. And stuff would get solved all the time, not with me directing anything, but it would just get solved because we were all in the same room bringing up stuff at work. And two things happened. One, I think the projects moved forward more smoothly. People had connections. I mean, it's only a small consulting business, like 40 people, but they had connections where they may have not have been working on the same client, so they didn't really know that team. So there was a lot of cross-client fertilization. And two, out of work, some amazing friendships have been made, which I'm really proud of. And we have a Synergy alumni group to this day. I mean, I exited that business in 2014, but over 10 years ago, and they still have, quarterly meetups in Philly. I'm still I'm the mentor to most of my leadership team as they've moved on to do other things. And those friendships, I think, will be lifelong for those people. And that to me is like a huge benefit of, we put so much of our lives into our work, that being able to have friends outside of that. And I feel, I have friends, that I met when I was 22, and we laughed hard and we played hard, and they're still friends now. In fact, I'm in business with two of them. And I think those Synergy people have the same thing. And they've gone on, a lot of them, to go client side, actually, curiously. And so they're now able to give support to their ex-colleagues. So that's a huge benefit of building this kind of thick culture. But, primarily it helped us move the jobs forward really fast, and people got to know each other. We had social events. We used to go away for a retreat every year, 4 or 5 days, somewhere lovely, and training, because otherwise it was a benefit in the US system. But we'd go away and we'd basically bond, and people would have a chance to do things that they wouldn't do in the office, and to be in a lead role doing, leading whitewater rafting or whatever, that they wouldn't have. And again, that builds this thick culture, which for us in the US was particularly important because it's an at-will employment state in Pennsylvania, so people can come and go. They give 2 weeks notice. And if you don't have people that are going to stay with you for a long time, it can be very disruptive to your business.
Gosh, yeah, that's so. An employee could just give notice 2 weeks. They could move on. Wow,
they move on in 2 weeks, and you as an employer can also give them 2 weeks notice and be gone. So there's not the same. I mean, I'm not sure today actually in any business there's the same kind of loyalty that existed a generation ago. But in the US, it's a different culture.
And I'm conscious of the timeline with Cormis, and I know the US took a slightly different approach to COVID, but you started the business pre-COVID. You had the earn-out during the COVID period, and my understanding is there was, the US broadly followed, will work from home, etc. So you saw the first half was that everyone in an office. How did you have to adapt culture to? I use the COVID period, but it's kind of where the world is now. Is we're in office less. Those moments where everyone is together is less. A lot of our clients, our business is 2 days, but I might be in one day, you might be in another. How did you then cultivate for the second half? Or how, with the businesses you advise now, do you help them cultivate that same lunchtime feeling without physically being there?
So with Cormis in the London office, that we I think they were in 2-3 days a week, but we'd make it the same day. So I think Monday and Thursday were Cormis days. So all the Cormis team, we would take over a particular corner of the office, because it's all, no one has fixed seating. So you just book a desk, but we'd know that corner was the Cormis corner. So we still would have everybody coming into the office. And in fact, the US has been a lot harder because they didn't return as quickly. And I think the leadership of our parent group within the London office was super proactive in getting people to come in. They set up a 5-a-side football team. There's lunchtime library clubs and all this stuff going on, which encourages people to come into the office. And it got to the point where if you didn't book a desk, you wouldn't have a space. the US office has been a lot less, it's a lot more fragmented. People, I think, have really taken to homework, so it's much harder. And I think it's really hard if you're a younger person who that's all you've known. Maybe you've had a job for 2 or 3 years and you don't really get the culture. Like it's hard. I think we shouldn't underestimate how hard it is. But I think the more that you can encourage people to see that being with their colleagues, you can ask the question sitting next to them that you were kind of pondering, but you didn't feel that you wanted to bother them by Zooming them or Teamsing them or sending them or picking up the phone or whatever. It's okay to ask that question when you're sitting next to them having a coffee. I think it's very hard for the people starting out on their career now.
No, I would agree, Sue. And I think, having started in the world before COVID, I can empathize, but I haven't lived the life of every day behind a screen. I think I remember being 21 in a shared house and there wasn't really anywhere to put, a large screen for your computer. And I do sometimes think when younger people are working in their bedroom in a shared house, I don't know if I would want to wake up and so go to sleep looking at my work stuff and wake up looking at my work stuff.
No, I certainly wouldn't. I think I need the break. And, I said I had a short attention span. So I work very hard for a short amount of time, then I need to go and do something else. And that could be go and work with somebody else on a different project. But I'm not one of these people that will work all day on the same piece. I can't do that. My brain doesn't work like that. And I think that's partly why our London office did so well with people coming back, is they just didn't have the space to work at home. So therefore, if they're going to get out, they might as well go. And we help them with, paying for their travel to come into London, to be in the office. There were lunches that were put on in the office to encourage people to get that kind of snowball going. I think once people see the energy that's in the office compared to sitting on the end of their bed balancing a laptop, they're definitely going to be in the office.
Yes, I think so. And probably the last one, I say the last one, all of the questions are around this journey, but having now done that journey 3 times or twice in services, once in product, and I know you're on a similar journey again with Vibrant, but if you were doing Cormis again, this is a great question for anyone who is listening to this, and you advise many consultancies through the Consultancy Growth Network. What, given today's world, would be different? In a world of AI and a world of remote work, would there be anything you would have done or would do differently if you were doing Cormis round 2 today?
Well, I think it is quite different today. And I think AI has really dramatically changed and is changing how consultancies work and how they integrate. So, and I think the one thing I would say is making sure that whatever value proposition that you have in your consultancy business actually meets the needs of your clients. And, we talked about this a little bit before, Nick, that I think that sometimes our value proposition, we spent a long time like honing it, sorting it out, being really clear, communicating it to everybody. Everybody's jazzed up. Everybody knows what they're doing and we're all going. And then meanwhile, the client's needs have changed. And they may have subtly changed, but now are fit to that client need. So because it's not about us, it's always about the client. And that fit to the client need is no longer as snug as it could be. So I think one of the things that we need to do now, as AI is so radically changing things and what people are asking of consulting businesses and trying to kind of work out how they can do half of your job with a chat GPT and then you just come in and polish it up, which may not be a viable proposition for many, is actually just going back to fundamentals and sort of sitting down with a client and really listening to what they need. Because I've no doubt that we can add tremendous value to their business still. It just might be slightly different from what we were doing 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think it's a great point and almost links to what you said around, I think business development and client, just knowing what your clients want, are so intimately linked if you do business development properly. And actually, it's an area many consultancies struggle. They tell, and actually, it's the listening that's so important. I guess there's actually also a question of how do you advise people to think of what their value proposition is? Because I also do wonder if you've come out of a big consultancy, right, I help clients do things. You obviously built Cormis of a very clear proposition. How do you think about proposition, and how could someone listening to this, whether it's reshaping or just shaping, start to go on that journey?
It's a tricky question, really, because I think you come out and you set up a consulting business, you're doing it because you've come from a position to say, I can do that better. Like I've watched this need and I think I can do it better than the current businesses that are currently doing that, or I'm going to see that there's a need over there that's not being met by anybody and I'd like to serve that. And I think that I've got the capability to do that. So I think that's often the start point for people coming out of a business to say, I'm going to be a consultant now because I can go back and I can do it better than someone else can do it. But that isn't really a long-term value proposition, because I think the value proposition comes from a really deep understanding of what the client's business needs are, matched with what your capabilities are as an individual, as a leader, and also as an organization, so the collective of your people in your organization. So I think it comes back to a really deep understanding of who your client base is, what it is that they need, and matching up that. I'm not sure that's a very sophisticated answer, but I think that's fundamentally what it is.
I think it echoes what you said before in a good way, and actually is a good lesson for our listeners of it is that listening. And I have seen consultancies fall foul of, to your point, I've come out knowing you start a business because you think you are better than everyone else in your space, and that necessitates an element of arrogance. And actually, that can sometimes mean people don't, they see, what was it, the Steve Jobs, if I listen to everyone else, I wouldn't have made the iPhone, and think it's the same. And maybe there are versions of Steve Jobs, but you will probably be more successful listening to your clients if you won't make, you might not make the iPhone, but you'll probably make a successful consultancy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, listening and then listening with curiosity, because actually I think maybe the client is not able to articulate what they really need. And part of our job is to kind of be really curious about why they've come to that and what they've gone and why they feel that they haven't got that served already. And I remember when I very first started Synergy, and I was like, I need to get some business. And I went into a client. In fact, I went into the company that I had previously worked for, and I just said to what's keeping you up at night? And then that started a whole conversation with the client about the things they were worried about, that they didn't feel were being served by their existing agency and consulting base. And out of all the things that they explained, there were one or two that I thought, I can fix that. I mean, there were lots that I thought, oh my God, I don't know what to do with that one. But there was a couple that I thought, I can fix that. And then it was a question of saying, okay, would you be comfortable for me to come back to you with a proposal about how to solve that? Would that make you feel better? And they were like, absolutely. Oh my God, yes. So that was my initial way in when I started Synergy. And I think that, yes, the whole world has changed, but it's still fundamentally, what is it that our clients need from us? And how can we be confident that we can really effectively deliver that?
Well, and I think so. It's a great question for people to leave with for this section, because we've all heard the what's keeping you up at night, but actually how many people go in and ask that? And I think links to the business development as well is so often we think, I'm meeting Sue, I've got to pitch to her. And I've always, maybe it's just me, I'm not very good at pitching. I dislike pitch because yes, I'm trying to guess what you like. Whereas like you say, actually what's keeping you up at night? I'm here listening, I'm being guided by you, and I might not be able to help, but it's a much more collaborative way of going in.
And actually sometimes the client just wants an ear. You might not be able to solve that particular problem, but actually you've listened to them, you've heard them, you've empathized with them. Perhaps you've given them some practical tip from your time that you spent in their industry, and it hasn't resulted in a sale on that occasion, but you've actually moved the ball forward. We talk a lot of both at Synergy and Cormis about moving the ball forward. Like all we're trying to do every day is move the ball a little bit forward.
I love that metaphor. Also, it plays better in the US with an NFL analogy, I imagine.
Probably.
But I think, as you say, we so often think we're going to go for the, to bring it to a British sport, go for the goal, when actually
just need to move
it forward and step by step, because relationships are long. They can take time to build, but actually, if you're building a consultancy, the payoff is huge.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this because you want to improve your consultancy or your practice area or just your career, then I want to give you something that will help you supercharge that on top of this, focused on marketing. If you go to our website, createengage.co.uk/insights, you can download our super detailed ROI-driven strategy framework ebook. In that, we go into detail on exactly what you need to do to build an effective marketing strategy, to build a strategy that will deliver you ROI and help you achieve your growth goals. So take that link, download it, and enjoy that after the end of this episode.
So something else, Sue, and we've touched on it a little bit earlier around hiring for Bob and that that cultural piece, US, UK. And again, this is as much for people listening both sides of the Atlantic as someone thinking, well, I'm going to go UK to US or vice versa. And I'd just be interested if from a business context, there are any other differences. If I'm thinking, and let's take this both ways, because you again have worked both sides. If someone wants to go UK to US or the opposite, what are those things from a business perspective they should expect are different?
Well, I think it's probably more different than you expect, given that we both speak a version of English. And I think from a business perspective, the US, I mean, one of the huge strengths of the US is it's very pro business. It's moving. We talked about moving the ball forward. It's moving the ball at a huge pace forward. It's one of the reasons it bounces back from recessions and dips in the economy so quickly, because people are just on the go all the time. And what that means from a business context is that people are on the go all the time. They don't take vacations. They'll quite often be communicating on their vacations. So the fact that your client's gone away on a holiday for a week does not mean that you won't hear from them all the time. And the expectations of you responding and being on 24/7 are real, particularly with some clients that are feeling the pressure within their own organizations. They are I find that they use consultants in a much more ubiquitous way in the US. There's consultants for everything. And in fact, when I moved over first in the pharma industry, I was shocked at the number of consultants that I had in my department doing things that I really thought I should be doing as the business lead, writing marketing plans and things like that, which you wouldn't have had in the UK. So I think they do use a lot of consultants, which is great for our type of business and very attractive. But I do think there's an expectation of speed and response and delivering results at a much quicker pace than you see in the UK, in my experience. And we certainly became quite adept very quickly at communicating deadlines to clients. So we set the expectation that if they sent us something on the Friday, they were not going to get it back Monday morning. They might get it Tuesday morning, but actually automatically assuming that we were going to work the weekend on it was not fair on our team. So as a leader, you become quite protective about the hours that your people work, or they will work all the hours.
Just to that last piece, how did you manage that in the context of a business culture where that, by the sounds of it, was expected?
It is expected, but I think more importantly is the reliability of delivering. So, I think when I first moved over within pharma and I worked in this global role, I used to have a lot of the countries in my organization would all deliver their business plans to me or to the global hub. And it was really interesting cultural insight, because you'd have, certain countries and would say, yes, we'll deliver it. And it would never come on time. The US was one of those to me. The French affiliate would be moaning that they just didn't have the time to do this piece of work, and why do they have to do it anyway? But it would come in and it would be beautiful. So it was a really interesting insight. So I think a lot of what is promised is not necessarily delivered. So we succeeded because if we said we were going to give it to you Tuesday morning, you got it Tuesday morning. And it might have taken quite a hard discussion on the first go round about why we needed Monday to make sure we had the content right and then you could get it Tuesday, because we're not working the weekend. But after you got it when you said we would, that became much more important to the clients. So the actually doing what you say you're going to do, following through on what you said you're going to follow on, became a huge reliability indicator for Synergy and was a great signal to our clients. And we were delivering stuff where other people weren't. And that became our way of kind of managing, like when we say to you, you're going to get it Thursday, you are going to get it Thursday.
No, I think, like you say, getting in a world, if people are not always delivering, showing, yes, you wait, but the quality comes, and then that becomes the thing you live by.
Exactly. And that was our core proposition, was super high quality. We were kind of averagely priced, super high quality. So we were a fantastic agency. And then we added all this surround support to the client to make them look good in their job. And they definitely wanted to take us with them if they moved jobs.
A great strategy. And to the point on pace, because again, people can take that in different ways. And you've dispelled it to an extent in that example. But I'll ask, when you say that the US just everything's faster, one inference is, well, if I want my firm to succeed there, we're going to have to work 15-hour days, not 12-hour days, or we're going to have to deliver a 1-year project in 6 months. Was that the case, or was it about showing value differently? How does that manifest?
I think there is a pressure to deliver stuff faster because the clients are often measured on a quarterly basis. So, in the UK, you might be measured on an annual basis. Maybe there's a 6-month check-in. In the US, it's quarter by quarter by quarter by quarter. So there is everything lives or dies by its quarter, and perhaps you might not unlock the money for the next one if you haven't performed on the other one. So there's definitely a pressure to perform at a faster pace. But I think that then is the onus is on us almost to break down that project into milestones that can be delivered. So there are some quick wins. So we would quite often, when we wrote a proposal, write it in a way that said, and for Cormis we would definitely do this, where we would say, these are your quick wins. Like, this is what you can show to your internal team that this is making a difference to the business. These are your midterm wins, and this is the long-term benefit you're going to get by having these people with this increased capability. So I think we adapted the way we wrote proposals to kind of facilitate what the client needed in terms of, because it's about showing what they can do internally, because everyone's reporting to somebody. So we helped them report in a way that fitted into their system.
I love that. And this is a tangent, but I realize, and this should have struck me earlier, Sue. And so the business you ran, capability, and you mentioned, I infer there's some training in there, there's some people development. For me, it's typically a business I don't see many people able to scale. And you've done that. And I guess I'd be really interested, and you might say, Nick, it's just the ones you've seen, but often in consulting, people talk about get into a client, scale what you're doing for a client. And actually, it sounds like you did that pretty well. How did you approach the selling of, I guess, that packaging and that scaling out? Because some people might be thinking, well, if you're selling a training course, once you've trained the exec, you've trained the exec. And I know it's a complete tangent, but it just struck me from earlier. How did you approach that to make people and capability scalable?
So I think because we saw capability as more broad than training, we would often work with a capability framework. So within a role, within a company, you'd have a capability framework that would take you from place A to place B with lots of different levels. So we'd end up building out that whole framework. So what do you need, when you come in as a new person in that role? Where should you be? Where should you aim to be? So it becomes more of a pathway or a journey than a single intervention of training. And because you're then responsible for the framework, you're then can be responsible for delivering everything within the framework. So some of it may be delivered as a training intervention, some of it may be even one-to-one coaching, some of it would be role sharing or stuff that perhaps Cormis may not have actively delivered, but the organization may have, because you have on-the-job training or on-the-job development. But it was all within a framework which we had our hands in. And often the framework would be bespoke to the client because they may have their own vision of what the capabilities are. So we quite often would follow a management consultant in that would basically, some of the big 4 firms where they would come in and say, to survive in the next 10 years, Takeda needs these capabilities. And then there would be some sort of audit that would be like, oh no, you don't have them now. Oh no, what are you going to do? And then we would be somebody that would come in and say, okay, we can take you from place A to place B within this framework that's linked to your big company strategic goals of what you need to do to survive in as the world develops. So it was a much bigger thing than we're delivering. We saw it as a much bigger thing than we're delivering a piece of training. On the ground, what do? A lot of training, but we didn't package it as training.
And I love that. And I think it can relate across consulting businesses. To your point, having that framework, almost, it wasn't positioned like this, but that's a menu of to get, as you say, everyone in the organization needs to go from A to B. They need to do these 10 things, and that then links from as a menu back to your services where you're adding that value. I think it makes it, when you explain it, Sue, sounds very simple, but makes a lot of sense and actually is quite applicable to all consultancies.
Yeah. And I think what we ended up with then was a baseline piece of business that was repeated year on year, because everybody needs marketing 101, 201, 301. Plus they need negotiation skills. So you'd end up with this menu of things that ran every year, because you'd run 2 sessions of those a year for whoever came. Plus then you'd have the emerging business issues. So when COVID hit, we did tons of, how do I work online? How do I talk to an opinion leader remotely? Like, how do I get my medical reps that are now no longer able to go into a doctor's office because they're too busy treating COVID patients? What do I do with them? How do I get them to still, provide information? So we pivoted massively to learn how to deliver those capabilities, because quite frankly, we didn't have them. So, but that was why our business really took off in COVID, because we had all the base of business, but then we had all this extra stuff helping people work in this new world of remote.
Wow, fantastic. And like you say, I think the innovation to do it as well, because that was a period of dramatic change, and actually spinning those things up takes incredible effort and links back to what you say. If you've got the framework, you're bolting that onto the framework for that new world. And I guess if you're still running the business, you'd probably be training people on how to use AI now.
I'm sure I have to train myself first.
And then I guess the last sort of area for today, and it links a bit to what we've talked about and some of the work with Vibrant. And I guess start maybe with yourself, because I think you've touched before on staying true to your vision. And I'm interested, I guess, partly what your vision was on each stage of these 3 businesses, and how you have checked in at each point. How have you decided this is the right path? Because when you run your own business, it's great in that you set your destiny. It also is, to our point there around having a job framework, you don't have structure. And I guess, how have you set that vision? And at each point, what are the questions you ask yourself, or the kind of mental tests that you say, yes, this is the right thing for me?
I think in some ways it's quite a hard question, because I definitely am a goal-oriented person, because I like to set myself a goal. And I think when we set up Synergy, I was like, okay, my first goal is to pay the money back that I've borrowed from the UK to set up the business. And then it was like, now I want to want to get to 1 million in revenue. Then I want to get a 5 million in revenue. So that I'm definitely goal-oriented in that way. But I think on a day-to-day basis, I think I'm quite good at finding the fun in whatever I'm doing. So I really loved what we were doing. And I at Synergy, I felt that we were making a huge difference to people. So for me, part of why I think I'm on this planet at this time is to make some sort of impact to those around me. And that makes me feel really good. And so if I can do that in a work context, then I think that I'm doing what I should be doing. And in some ways, this is going to sound most bizarre, I don't almost care what that work context is, so long as I feel that I'm making an impact. Which is why I come back to, I kind of put that onto other people. I think that's why people join an organization, is to make an impact. It's why they show up, is to make an impact. It's why they want to talk about what they've done in their lives. It's to share that so that they can help others make an impact. So for me, with Synergy, I felt at every point, if I sat back and reflected, and sometimes that was not for months because you were on the go, you're so busy and you're doing stuff and you're kind of automatically doing stuff. But I think at the times when I was able to sit back and reflect, I felt that I was building something that I was proud of, that I felt positive about, that the people that worked there enjoyed it. And I will say I got a lot of energy from the people in Synergy. We laughed a lot. We had a lot of fun. We did really good work. We played very hard and we worked our butts off, and we built something that we were all collectively proud of. And we used to joke that if you cut someone, they'd bleed orange. That was our brand colours. And I think that fundamentally is at the core of me. I want to feel something I want to build something that's meaningful. And with Cormis, the same thing. It was a slightly different objective because we thought we're building it to exit. But at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, I wanted to have an organisation that I enjoyed working in, that we could laugh at, we could lunch together, we could solve problems together, we could solve clients' issues together. And the same way with the clients. Like, we definitely won pitches. And I know that because the client said to us, we've given you this pitch because we think it'd be really fun to work with you. And yes, they all think obviously you can do the job they want you to do, but it's also about people buying people, that you want to do something where you feel that you're bringing positive energy to the world around you and to the people that you're interacting with.
No, completely agree. It's. I think I said to you at one of the events we sat next to each other. Our purpose as a business is to have fun and be awesome. Which it sounds
absolutely. I'll be in your business. I'll come work for you, Nick.
It's very, very similar. And linked to that, and this might be from your career. This might be from the work you do with Vibrant. For our listeners, this has been a hard couple of years in the consulting market. Some a little more, some a little less. And this might be from your own career or from working with people now. Is how can people keep that fun through the hard times and or re-find it if they have lost it for working too hard too long or being in a tough market too long?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard now. And I do see quite a number of people who I think are feeling a bit squashed and downtrodden. And I think it's really important to surround yourself with champions and people that you can talk about what you have done that's really good, that you've done in your business that's amazing. Because I think it's so easy to get caught in that kind of cycle of, well, we didn't get that piece of work and we didn't do this, we didn't. Whereas there is so much stuff of we did. And when I sit down with some of the businesses that I coach through the Growth Network or other businesses that I interact with, I'll quite often just get the founder or the CEO just to talk to me about what they've done and why they've done it. And it's amazing because you see them sit up straighter, there's a load more energy, their eyes get all twinkly, and they start to kind of just talk about the joy that their business brings them and what they've done for clients and what difference it's made, or the people that they've interacted with, or the people that they've brought onto the business that have now grown into a leadership role. And I think it's almost going back to reminding ourselves of our why, because we all went into consulting for positive reasons, because we wanted to bring our experience and expertise to bear on a bigger pie than we had perhaps in our previous role. And I think sometimes in these tricky times when it all seems doom and gloom and the world's falling around it, we forget about that. So I would encourage people, if they're feeling a little bit squashed or downtrodden, is to just find somebody to talk to about what they've done, or have somebody that can listen to their experiences. And I would say focus not on things that you haven't done, but the things that you have done and the impact that you have done. Because in everything that might have gone a little bit wrong, there's definitely some nugget of goodness in there to pull out. And I think once you get yourself back into that, I am pretty good at this, and the clients really do value what we bring. And actually, when we did that, this happened, and our people were really able to kind of solve that for the client. Then you start getting back into that more positive, energetic kind of space that then allows you to think a little bit more about growth, rather than feeling that you can't grow because the world's against you.
I love that advice, Sue. And it reminds me of a book that I've read fairly recently. That's from, I think it's Strategic Coach is the program. I'd have to remember the author, but they talk about having the gap and the gain. And actually, if you focus on what you're missing, you'll be sad. If you focus on what you've gained, and to your point, even in a tough year, you might have hired someone, won a client, had a nice dinner.
Absolutely.
But you can focus on that positive.
Yeah, totally. And I think that your brain, your energy flows in your brain wherever you put it, right? So if you choose to put it in those positive gains, that's where your energy flows. And if you don't, then your energy doesn't flow there.
I'm a big believer as well. I'm a fan of Tony Robbins, and I think he says something very similar. The energy, where energy goes, where focus goes, energy flows.
Totally, yeah.
And I completely agree with you. Just before I move on to the quick fires, is there anything else you wanted to cover today, or have we covered everything? Is there anything for Vibrant? We've covered a lot, Sue.
I think we've probably covered most of it. We haven't talked a lot about Vibrant, but I think what Vibrant is doing is exactly what we just talked about, which is helping leaders and helping businesses to find their most vibrant state. So to think about how that they tackle their business in a way that really energizes their employees and plugs them into their mission. So it's not what we haven't named it as Vibrant, but that's very much what we're doing in the Vibrant company.
And why don't we, just because it does deserve a shout out, I have worked actually with Sarah, not with yourself, but I am sure everyone who runs the program is fantastic. What is it? What if someone wants to be part of Vibrant? What do you offer? Do you want to just give people a little minute on it?
Yeah, so we offer a range of different programs. So we do offer Vibrant retreats where people can come away with us over 3 or 4 days, immerse themselves in the thinking of Vibrant thinking with whatever business challenges they might bring with them, and just be amongst a peer group of people coming away energized with a plan of how they're going to kind of address whatever challenge they brought. So we do offer retreats. We're offering some shorter taster programs where you can come perhaps for the day and get a sense of what Vibrant's about, and again, bring something that you're currently struggling with and see if we can help you reframe that and rethink about that in a different way. And then we do one-to-one coaching either with businesses or with individuals that need a little bit more personal approach.
Fantastic. Well, as someone who I've actually ended up doing the one-to-one, having missed, I think I had COVID for your,
that's
it was
right.
the first
Our
ever
retreat.
retreat. Yes. So I would have got the opportunity to work with you had I not been ill, but the one-to-one was fantastic. I hear the retreat was fantastic, and we will chat about those after this as well. The last questions then, Sue, and these are ones I ask all guests, and so fascinated for your answers as well. First one is books, and this is really it's a recommendation question. What is the book you have gifted the most or recommended or has had the biggest impact on you, and why is that?
So I have to say I'm not a massive reader of books, and you are much more likely to get a gift of flowers or something that I've made in my random silversmithing.
Your cake was lovely, I have to say.
Cake or something like that than you are to get a book from me. I'm a doer, and I learn by doing and by seeing and watching. So I'm not a massive reader, if I'm honest. And podcasts, I do a few podcasts, but I find that my brain goes off in a different direction sometimes. So I'll be totally transparent with that. So I've recently recommended the telepathy tapes actually to a number of people. I know that's not a book.
No, please.
But it is a podcast that explores how non-verbal people communicate. And there's some really fascinating insight into how we as humans, when one sense maybe doesn't work, expand our other senses. And it's, if you haven't listened to it, I'd really recommend it. Go back to the very beginning, but I think they drop something every couple of weeks. But it is amazing insight into the human brain and how we work as humans with each other, and how our human operating system is maybe beyond what we might think it is today. So I love that, and that fits so much into our Vibrant Mind thinking as well.
I love that.
So that would be my recommendation there.
I will go and check it out. And I have heard sort of stories of if someone loses their hearing or sight, the other senses do, as you say, strengthen. So I'm fascinated to hear, yes, how if someone is nonverbal, what does that mean for those other senses? So that.
You'd like this.
Well, and Sue, as you know, I've got a train journey home after this, so that will be on the podcast. And then the next question is, and this is it could be a recap, it could be new things, but it's advice. You have 3 people in front of you. 1, start of the career, just entering the industry. 1, 4 to 5 years in, and take that, as broad as you want in that range. It's someone who's in that middle of their career before they are a leader in a business. And then that final one, in a consulting context, I talk about it as approaching partner, which can mean someone's going to start their own business. They are taking that kind of leadership, equity position in a business. And so for each of those 3, the new starter, the middle, and then that person going into leadership, what one piece of advice would you give to each?
So I think actually, because I did give this some thought before we sat down, Nick, my advice would actually be quite similar to all 3. So I think for the starter person, I'd say, open your ears, because really you're just going to be feeding from the fire hose for the first few years of your job. There's going to be so much coming at you. So, really it's your ears that are going to be the most beneficial sense there of listening and learning and being really, really curious. So I think my fundamental advice to all 3 of those individuals is about curiosity and being really interested in people, interested in your clients, interested in the business and what you can get from it and where it's going and what you're doing, what your role is within it. Just being really curious and asking questions and kind of seeking slightly deeper than just the surface. And I think for the middle person that's been in the job a few years, I would say, still be curious, because it's so easy to think, well, I know that now, I've done that now. But especially as our world seems to be getting faster at the pace of change, that kind of skill of being still asking questions and wondering why, and could you make your offering actually better because you've learned something new. And I think for the person that's approaching partner or thinking about the next leap, maybe it's a bit more about reminding yourself about why you were curious in the first place. And just, again, there still is that kind of wanting to learn and wanting to get to evolve and be new and be better. And I think that all stems down from this kind of curiosity. So I think I'd probably say the same to all three of them.
I think a great point and a great reminder, Sue. We lose our curiosity as we get older. And I think reminding you don't have to do that, I think it's an important lesson.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sue, this has been great. Thank you. The last question for anyone who wants to get in touch, they want to find out more about yourself or Vibrant, where would you point them to?
If you want to get in touch, then you could send me an email, sue@thevibrantcompany.com. LinkedIn is also another way to get hold of me. I'm under Sue Lohr, and you can, I'm not brilliant with the socials, I must say, or with LinkedIn, but I always will answer a message if someone reaches out.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much and all the best
for the
rest of your week.
Thanks very much for having me.
Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the specialist digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Now, for long-time listeners, you will probably already know who we are. You may have even heard one of our ads on a previous episode of this podcast. But for those of you who don't, here is a short introduction. At Create Engage, we help you create an effective marketing strategy for your consultancy, a strategy that will resonate with your target clients. And then we support you by delivering the campaigns you need to turn that strategy into a reality, helping you to build your brand, raise your profile with your prospective clients, and ultimately generate return on investment from your marketing activity. Now, I could tell you about many of the great clients that we work with and the results we've delivered for them. But instead, I'm going to do something much more powerful and something that I would recommend you do for your own marketing. I'm going to let our clients do the talking for us. If you are currently thinking about marketing for your consultancy, you're going to want to listen to this.
Create Engage started the process for us. They managed it end to end. They came up with some really creative ideas and we were really happy with the work that they did, which meant that we could just focus on running the business. Not only did we start conversations with clients that we hadn't spoken to before, but also there was tangible return on investment by some work that we were given.
They've helped right from the initial shaping of the idea through to helping us work out what our end goal was. They've supported us with the visual identity and our positioning of the brand.
We've had an immediate expansion of our network and have initiated a raft of new conversations with owners, CEOs in target client organisations, and has led to us winning new projects already.
One of the greatest compliments, I guess, is that one of our competitors even said that they really like what we're doing with marketing and they wish they could be doing something as good.
So from our perspective, we couldn't recommend Create Engage any more than this.
I would certainly recommend Create Engage if you're a consulting firm. They really understand consultancies and the sort of challenges we face. And I don't think you're going to get much better marketing anywhere else.
So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Create Engage. They did a really good job for us.
So if you're looking for an agency that can help you achieve the results that our clients just described, then head to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can find out more about how we support consulting firms like you. You can download our latest ebook and you can get in touch to talk about how we can help you take your consultancy to the next level through digital marketing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.